Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with data center consolidation strategies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Luke McCormack, the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Homeland Security, Melonie Parker-Hill, the Division Chief, Enterprise Operations Center, U.S. Department of State, Bruce Downs, Deputy Chief Information Officer, Department of Interior, Larry Sherrow, the Federal Solutions Architect at Brocade, Tony Gehr, the Technical Director, Lockheed Martin Information Systems and Global Solutions, and Nathan Jones, the Vice President of Federal at Red Hat. Let's get into the issues, folks. Let's start with Luke McCormack at DHS headquarters. Luke, give us some examples of some of the progress you're making with data center consolidation at DHS.
Sure, Jim, and I want to say thank you and thanks to, it's an honor to be here with my colleagues both in the public sector and the private sector.
Very cool.
So we have been on a journey over the last few years, about 4 years, to focus on consolidating data centers. We have about, actually will exceed 40% of our data center assets will be consolidated into 2 core data centers that we have, one in southern Mississippi and one in Virginia. And that is going well. We have recorded an excess savings of or cost avoidance of about $220 million.
Very cool.
Yes, very important for us. And we have recently restructured both of the contracts in those data centers to be full consumption based. And what that means is that all of our operating components, which we have many of them, very large engineering organizations there, can order by the slice, by the drink, however you want to call that, directly into those services and buy it in a more consumption-based capability, which we feel is very important.
Yeah, that's great.
As far as our long-term, what we're calling our open market strategy.
Yeah, cool. And I know how easy it is to get all those components together, and everybody to get on the. I've been there, done that, many times in the past myself. Melonie Parker-Hill over at State Department. Tell us, Melonie, how a little bit of the progress being made at State with data center consolidation.
Sure. Good morning. I guess I'm going to use one of Luke's words. He used the word journey, and it's definitely been a journey. A few years ago, our Undersecretary Kennedy had a vision for us to move out of lease space that we have out in northern part of Virginia into more into government-owned space, and that in doing so, we actually just completed a major project, phase 1 of a major project, by placing modular data centers on our property and on government-owned space, excuse me, in our Beltsville location. So with that, we will be able to save approximately $10 million a year on lease space, as well as we're on government-owned space and modular data centers where it not only allows us to reduce our footprint from approximately 14,000 square foot to about 2,000 square foot, and with the energy consumption and things of that nature, we're just moving forward in that direction. So it's a great thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's not going away. I mean, data center consolidation started years back, but I still see OMB pushing things out like constantly about, reducing energy cost and continuing the goal and moving forward and managing the process. So it's not like one of those things that came up years ago and it fades away. It's still a front burner issue. Larry Sherrow over at Brocade. Tell us how Brocade positions to support your customer in moving forward with data center consolidation and virtualization.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
I'm very fortunate to where sitting at this table, I get to see many different agencies and how they're approaching data center consolidation. The really interesting thing about data center consolidation is when you talk about data center consolidation, it means different things to different people at every agency. If you talk to an infrastructure guy, they're interested in reducing space, reducing power, reducing AC. You talk to a server guy, well, that could be exchange consolidation. Brocade as a company has a history in fiber channel. So a lot of times people come to us and they want to look at consolidating their storage. The way we're really moving forward is we offer more than just storage. We have campus. We have a great data center product that's tied directly into virtualization. So for us, we're able to try to break down the silos from different technical fields and work with them to build a holistic plan on how to reduce overall in the data center.
Yeah, good points. And you're right when you say data center consolidation means different things to different people. I mean, it's been getting cloudy in my mind. You have data center consolidation, and then we have cloud computing, and we have managed services, and we have virtualization, whatever. And how do you differentiate those? And we're actually going to talk a little bit about that in the next segment. But Bruce Downs over at Department of Interior now. I'm told you guys have some really cool stuff that you're doing in this area. Can you talk a little bit about the progress you're making?
Sure, thank you. The Department of Interior is different than a lot of the other agencies. We have a huge number of locations and a very broad mission
Spread
set.
Out all over the place.
We have over 2,400 locations that are permanent, and that flexes to over 2,700. With seasonal work and based upon the time of year. So we have to serve our customers where they are and their mission where they are, and they're there for a reason. They're out there because that's where the land is, that's where the public is, and we have to engage with them and enable them to have the data, collect the data, and use the data to help us all make better decisions. So very challenging environment for us. We have made progress. If you look at it on the books for data center consolidation, I'm not going to say the number of data centers we've consolidated, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But significant number of our data centers, small data centers, have been consolidated. We've reduced space by 3%. We've reduced our Windows servers by 13%, primarily through virtualization and decommissioning. But the numbers don't tell the full story, right? This is really about learning more about our organization, top to bottom, from the bureaucracy in Washington out to the field and out to the individual person.
It does force you to sort of do a portfolio management process as you do this consolidation.
So also across the bureaus and offices, there's data that they rely upon that in common. And so finding those common needs and connecting at the data layer more than the infrastructure layer is where we're focusing. So.
Yeah, very good. We'll drill down on some of that stuff as we move along. Tony Gehr over at Lockheed Martin, tell me how Lockheed's involved in this. What's some of the things you're doing to support your customer base and moving forward to move data center consolidation?
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me this morning.
Sure.
So data center consolidation, it's a focus at Lockheed, both for what we do with our customers and really what we're doing internally, because we like to make sure that the things that work for our customers really work for us here at Lockheed Martin. So where we've worked with the Department of Energy to do a substantial reduction from 11 to 2 data centers in the Hanford Center, we've actually taken Lockheed Martin from 43 data centers down to 3. So we're talking tens of thousands of millions of dollars of savings. We're also taking customers, FTC, U.S. Mint to the cloud, the Housing and Urban Development Agency. So lots of consolidation efforts that are really helping us out. What really gets us excited at Lockheed Martin is some of the new trends in data center consolidation. There are new Tier 4 data centers available that'll get you below 1.2 power usage efficiency, which is where we all know we want to get. And not only are these green data centers, but they're pre-integrated with telecom providers. So when you start to see the savings from those telecom pre-existing circuits, which are substantial, you get Tier 4 capability at Tier 2, Tier 3 pricing, which everybody says, hey, that's really where we want to get. So we're really working hard on those efficiencies because when we save money, then we can put it back into more mission for the
absolutely.
agencies.
And there's a big push for green again. It's one of those things that's come and gone. Like a couple of years ago, everything was into green everything, and it sort of faded away. And now I see OMB coming back out with we need more energy efficiencies in data centers and industry stepping up with a lot of cool stuff. Nathan Jones, Red Hat. I think open source.
Definitely, yes.
Tell us the role Red Hat's playing in helping data center consolidation programs move forward.
So we've seen our customers do a great job with data center consolidation, but at the same time, the finish line keeps moving in terms of what is the expected progress that the end users want out of these new data centers, out of these new capabilities. So we've been helping customers certainly with virtualization, but even beyond that, we see customers stretching that expectation to things like containers. And customers are asking us, how can we use the current tools and software we have today and help us not only consolidate, but also bridge the gap simultaneously to these new cloud computing expectations. So that's the expectation we see out of the end users, and that progress is happening, but the finish line has moved definitely for those customers in terms of what they thought they needed out of cloud computing in the beginning, and now the increased security and design challenges that they have today.
Yeah, it really is a moving target. And that container issue is kind of interesting. We've been talking about doing a radio show around containerization and how that's going to impact a lot of these programs. But let's talk about it's come up. Let's talk about virtualization, cloud computing, managed services, all that. Let's start with Melonie this time. Melonie Parker Hill. You know, when you're doing data center consolidation, I guess you got to think about cloud and public private cloud, and you got to think about virtualizing. You don't just want to move everything as is in there, and everyone's talking about managed services. Luke already's brought up this idea of consumption based. How do you factor those kinds of issues into your data center consolidation plans?
Well, all of them are very important. When we use the word cloud, I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and cloud, the definition kind of, it's not the same across
You're exactly right.
industries. So
yeah, we've done a bunch of radio shows on that, and I'm telling you, I'm still not sure I know exactly what people mean when they talk about it.
So for the State Department, we're at one of the things that I can definitely speak on is the virtualization. I believe the last time I was here, again, I spoke on our virtualization first policy. It is a policy that has, when I spoke about it last year, we were just talking about it. Now we have definitely implemented it. So before any device goes into a data center, enterprise data center at the Department of State, it is first looked at for its capacity or the viability of going to a virtual platform. Mm-hmm. You can't just put a physical machine. And we have a governance board and all of those other buzz things around that. We have structure so that we can definitely try to consume as much virtual resources versus the physical. We also have implemented what we call the VDI zero client on our domestic side, where I think we have approximately 200, a little over 300, under 300 devices out there under zero client. So we're taking away the fat client with the hard drives and things of that nature. So that's going to give us a more secure environment as well.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do data center consolidation, you want to take advantage of everything else you can do at the same time. You don't want to just move stuff you have into another building. You want to modernize and do whatever you can in the process. Luke, how about over at DHS with virtualization, cloud computing, managed services, and so forth? I mean, I've heard you. I've spoken with you one-on-one, and I've heard you talk publicly many, many times about managed services and how important that is, and buy the drink, and you've already brought up consumption-based and so forth. How does that all fit into your data center consolidation plan?
Right. So I mentioned earlier about our open market strategy, and essentially what that is as we restructured our contracts with our two core data centers, which was really important. That gives us a lot of flexibility. It also gives us, our partners, a lot of flexibility to offer these different types of capabilities. Consumption-based gets us a couple things. One really important thing is speed to market, right? That's very important for us to be able to have that type of capability. The cloud computing virtualization, we assume virtualization, right, in that type of environment. And certainly our vendors are doing that for us, and obviously that's how all cloud vendors in a sort of a public cloud configuration, keep their cost in check, et cetera. The managed services, we will always look to buy managed services where it makes sense, right? We'll take our email environment and move it into a full managed service. We'll take our financial systems, our HR systems, and partner with either another federal agency, or buy that in a commercial environment where it makes sense. Of course, we're doing that leveraging all the FedRAMP capability that is out there. But this is very important to us because as we start to look at these hybrid type configurations, it's very important that we take advantage of all that the market has to offer,
right,
along with what we're doing internally within the department.
Yeah, just goes to show how complex some of these jobs are. I mean, there's so many moving parts to this thing, and managed service and cloud and virtualization, data center consolidation, and just working the strategies when you're sort of like working against a moving target. It gets to be very, very interesting. Bruce Downs, how about over at Interior? How do you work the virtualization? data managed services, cloud computing. How's that all fit into your plan?
Well, we look at all those together holistically as just a way to meet the data and application needs for our customers. And if you look at kind of the evolution of virtualization as an indicator, moving the desk, moving from under the desk to in the closet to down the hall to on the campus to to our core data center or to the cloud is really about that letting go of this illusion that having control or being able to touch the server or the device or control the people who are pulling the plugs is going to get you better service or more secure service. And so we're in that continuum of gaining confidence of ourselves technically and of our customers in that migration. So we look at those together, and our core data centers. We've identified 6 core data centers where we're starting to move major applications and our most sensitive data. We recently implemented migration of our financial system to the cloud, and that's going well. And we're finding the flexibilities of being able to adapt and flex the capacity and the performance, the configuration of those systems to be very useful to us. We've also released in the cloud side of it, we've released a community of interest for GIS, which coincidentally is the area where, of course, it won't work for GIS because of the big payloads. Yeah. And we're actually trying to disprove that. The root of why that doesn't work historically is it's designed where local area networks are cheap. And so they're not designing in the efficiencies of operation or architecting it in a way that'll work in a, broadly distributed way. So.
Yeah, right. Computers are getting real fast these days. So certain things we couldn't do in the past, we can do in broadband speeds are getting better and better and better. And so,
They are. The challenge for us, though, is that where we're located. There's places we're located that don't have running water and toilets. It's hard to imagine that sitting here in Washington, D.C., but that's where we are. So we have to adapt to that, too, and realize that we still have to meet the mission needs first.
There you go. Just another challenge that needs to be overcome. Nathan Jones over Red Hat, how do you guys work the virtualization and managed services and cloud and things like that? How's that all figure into your strategies?
Yeah, as many of my colleagues have said, the customers definitely have a challenge with hybrid environments. So we see customers looking at, as they build their strategy for how to deal with these hybrid environments, looking at the different application workloads as well. So customers know that they have to deal with the traditional move both from the legacy data center, the legacy applications, but at the same time deal with the Mode 2, newer, more nimble cloud-based applications. So they are looking and building a strategy for how they deal with both at the same time. How do they build an environment that can deal with the traditional legacy architecture and deal with the new types of applications that are expected from the users.
Sure.
They seem to be building portability into the design architecture. So we help customers specifically around platform as a service as one of those strategies with tools like our OpenShift, and then also with cloud management capability, because customers know and want to design into their strategy the expectation that not only are they moving from their traditional data center today, but they're going to be moving again. And how do they build in that expectation that private and public and community clouds are going to be part of the expectation? So this is not a one-time move.
Right. Yeah, and you don't want to get locked in forever into a specific thing. And I want to hear from Larry and Tony on this, but we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Luke McCormack from DHS, Melonie Parker-Hill from Department of State, Bruce Downs from Department of Interior, Larry Sherrow from Brocade, Tony Gehr from Lockheed Martin Information Systems and Global Solutions, and Nathan Jones from Red Hat. We're talking data center consolidation. When we went to break, we were talking about how virtualization, cloud computing, managed services all fit into data center strategies. And we heard from a number of our panelists, but we haven't heard from Larry at Brocade or Tony. So let's start with Larry. Larry, how does this fit into your strategy?
Well, all three of these are really key. I think we've already hit on it. You ask 10 people definition of cloud, you'll get 10 different answers. Managed services and cloud computing, I think that a lot of people think remote or someone else is handling this for me. what we've seen is a lot of the agencies are their own service providers. They have their own cloud, private cloud. For us, the key is keeping an open architecture. That way, whether a customer in virtualization picks Microsoft, picks KVM, picks VMware, whatever they have their strategy, we can support that by maintaining an open network and open infrastructure.
I like that. The Red Hat guys like that too, that open source, open infrastructure. How about Tony Gehr? Tony, how does this all figure into your strategy?
Sure. Virtualization certainly is the start, but it's just the beginning to getting to the consolidation. At Lockheed Martin, we obviously take a hybrid cloud approach, as you've heard from all the panelists. Mm-hmm. Every customer may have specific needs.
Yeah.
We have a Solus FedRAMP cloud. We've taken Federal Trade Commission and U.S. Mint. The identitytheft.gov site is out there and available. We've taken customers to Amazon and Microsoft. We're partners with those cloud providers, and then like for Housing, Urban and Development and U.S. Mint with Azure and Office 365. So that hybrid approach is absolutely critical. A couple of things, taking dev, test, and pre-production environments is a good way to start in the cloud, and we found a lot of customers resonate with that. And you heard from Nathan, platform as a service is critical because it gives you a manageable footprint, gives you control, and it actually improves your security and allows you to ingress and egress from the cloud, as you've heard before. And then finally, where you're trying to get really that managed services, whether it's with alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, where we do a managed print, or the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, where we provide cloud services, trying to get to a consumption-based model then helps the agencies and the customers decide what they need to buy and really optimize their CapEx and OpEx expenditures.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that hybrid approach, I think, is almost like inevitable. I think every agency is going to have a lot of things they're willing to go with a public cloud and a service, and there's going to be a few things that are just not going to be able to go that way for a whole variety of reasons. So I think you're right on with that. Let's you guys, you've all been involved in this for a long time. You're all playing key roles. Let's start with Bruce Downs this time. And Bruce, let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons you're learning. What we like to do in the show is try to get some word out to like your colleagues around town that here are some lessons learned. Here are things that we're bumping into that maybe get the word out and it might help your colleagues around town as they bump into the same issues. What are some of the things you're learning as you go through this process?
Well, we're learning a lot about our business, as I said in an earlier answer, the business of delivering on the mission. From a technical standpoint, we're also learning that you got to be careful about definitions, and you got to be consistent about definitions. The definitions drive your metrics. And if you change your definition in midstream, you kind of lose your way, and you might get the wrong signal. You might decide, oh, I'm going backwards. Well, no, we're just adjusting here on that. So getting those definitions right is really important. So the definition of a data center, for example, you also have to be careful there because you might drive unintended actions. Right. If people naively act upon what they see as the metrics. So carefully choosing your metrics to drive what's important. So measure what matters and act on what matters. So when I talked earlier about closing down a number of data centers, well, they're not all created equal. Yeah. Okay. They don't all offer the same type of benefit or opportunity for savings. And so, yes, it generates momentum. We get that. We get value from that to a point. But we got to get to what really, let's get back to the roots of what we tried to do in data center consolidation, which is it's about, improving your security posture, which it is. We look at that as generating economies of scale that are necessary to protect the family jewels, so to speak. Because some of those technologies are just expensive to implement, maintain, and actually get the value out of. Right. So that's kind of the basis for us.
Very good. Very good points. Luke, what are you learning through the process?
Well, as you can imagine, we've had a lot of lessons learned. I would just, top line, I would say a few things. One is make sure that you understand the reason why you're driving the consolidation. And there's a lot of different reasons. Drive your costs down. to increase your security, as has been mentioned, and also speed to market, right? As you look at these different types of technologies, any one of those three can be in the mix. It costs money to consolidate, right? And it costs time and energy with a finite amount of resources. So being able to explain that to your business sponsor, what you're trying to do, and what the return on that is from a business value is very important, right? Because a lot of this stuff is sort of back-end, back office, and doesn't directly increase the functionality of a TSA screener or a Border Patrol agent, with real-time information, right? There's a lot of indirect there, so that's very important. The other thing is, when it comes to cost, one of the things we learned is understand your cost, right? It's the biggest benefit we have found as we get into these environments is we have good, crisp, clean, transparent costs once we get in there. Coming out of that environment, a lot of times those costs are not completely understood and realized. There's a lot of indirect cost, and so there's not a absolute 100% savings, and that needs to be understood as well as you're working through those various. So we call it smart computing consolidation. And we say computing versus data center for a reason, because we're really focused on, what makes sense and where as far as making those choices. And then the time to do it is really important in making sure that you're clear about that with your business sponsors.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember from my days, the most difficult issues sometimes to deal with is convincing people that we need to spend a little money if we're going to want to save a little money, and then and getting that additional upfront money is not an easy thing in government, especially when you have lean budget years like we've had for the last several.
It's very much the back end of the business, let's call it.
Right.
And there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's certainly not the pointy end of the spear as far as business value directly. So that's something that just needs to be understood as you're embarking on this, because it does take a lot of resources, a lot of human capital calories to perform this properly.
Absolutely. Melonie, how about over at State Department? What are some of the lessons learned as you go through this process?
So my two colleagues here have already covered major areas. Just diving down a little further in the weeds, I just believe that we need to establish repeatable processes, because as we're transitioning from one data center to another or one asset to another, a lot of times the processes can be repeated. Sure. So it's no need to reinvent the wheel. Also, I think that working with our stakeholders, again, I'm data center, but I don't own the environmentals. I don't own certain parts and pieces that have to come together to make the consolidation effort successful. So we have to understand the priorities that our stakeholders also realize, in addition to our own priorities, making sure that they align together. And just, again, going one level deeper with the workers, with those that are actually the human capital, the calories that they are consuming, we have to make sure that they truly understand the vision and why we're going in this direction. Understanding the vision, they are more amped to follow.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Let's ask the actual people that are going to be using the systems what their expectations are. Something that I think in the past IT departments may not have done as well as they could have is to look at it from the point of view of the customer versus the point of view of the IT organization. Tony Gehr, what do you think? Some of the lessons you're learning through the process.
So that's great. Let me focus on three key lessons.
Okay.
One is, and you've heard it a little before, is plan and design to both ingress and egress from the cloud or the data centers. There will be a new cloud platform. There will be a new great data center. So use some container technology, platform as a service to prepare your team. So that's number one. Number two, think about the people in the approach. You've heard the process before. Use a DevOps approach. Automation with continuous integration and continuous delivery. You bring your app developers together with your operations staff. That's where you really start to get the efficiency and get a little bit more mission out. And then finally, don't forget, as soon as you deliver to the cloud or the data center, technical debt, these things start to age. Right. So you've got to manage that over time and think forward on your technical roadmap to the future.
Right. I like that term, technical debt, too. I hear that a lot for a lot of different issues. Larry, Sherrow, what do you think? What are some of the lessons you're learning along the way?
Well, it's such a challenging question. I mean, data center is such an interesting chess game. Everything affects the next move. You reduce your networking, that affects your servers. Reduce your servers, those connectivity reaches into storage. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in communicating with the agencies is breaking down the silos, making sure you have the right people in the room. You can't start one move and expect it not to affect the rest of the game. So having storage there, having servers there, having network, having your application guys, your DevOps guys, you need to have all the players in the room before you can really start to focus on how to build a strategy. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Nathan Jones, what do you think? What are some of the lessons you're learning along the way as you work your way through these issues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my colleagues mentioned a few of these already, but I think two of the major ones are around automation and around portability. So those were touched on. But we see customers learning lessons about the more they automate before they do the move, the more efficient they can get in that actual move, and the better they are when they get to their destination. So that's one where we've definitely helped folks around our Ansible tools and those types of configuration management types of processes. And then another one is around the portability. So that goes everything from the infrastructure to the apps layer. So touched on PaaS with a platform like our OpenShift. We see customers definitely working that into their strategy as a lesson learned of how I move the application and again, create an asset that I can move again, that I can take advantage of whatever infrastructure is available at whatever point in time. So that kind of portability is definitely a lesson learned that customers are benefiting from as they do the move, make it portable, make it reusable, make it able to deal with public clouds that may have OpenStack kind of configurations, traditional virtualization, or even containers, as we talked about here, that they're ready for anything with an abstraction layer like Platform as a Service.
Yeah, they're great points, because I know in the early days, people were somewhat concerned about, some of these programs will lock people into a specific technology or specific location forever, but some of the things we're hearing here about containers and platform as a service and open sourcing and so forth, it keeps that competitive spirit alive and allows flexibility for the future to go various different directions. Let's change course a little bit here. Let's talk about the things that are hard to do, the challenges, the things that are really the hurdles you got to get over to get to where you want to go with all this stuff. Luke, what are some of the really tough things that the challenges you face as you move towards data center consolidation? What are the things that sort of like get in the way and you got to work your way through them? And let's take money off the table, because we all know that funding is an issue. I mean, that's sort of a duh issue. We know that. Other than funding, what are some of the other challenges that you face as you try to move forward?
Yeah, I would say one that I think affects all of us. You've heard the panel members talk about containerization, DevOps, et cetera, and some of these advanced techniques.
Right.
And we're doing an incredible amount in that area and have just fantastic results. So as we get into this open market capability, one of the big premises of that was to give us sort of this open competition, right? We don't want to have limited choices, and we want to be able to make smart decisions, and we want to have access to these various types of computing for different reasons, right? Both internal public or internal private clouds and external public clouds. The skill base, the industrial skill base across our market, and I say this in both both internally within the federal service and our partners, there's just not enough capacity out there right now. Just simply is not enough. And I think across the board we need to grow that. I think the cloud vendors have a lot of capacity, right, and that continues to come online. Where we see a shortage, if you will, is the vendor community's ability to provide increased demand as far as DevOps type skill sets, et cetera. And then the federal services ability to manage these sophisticated types of environments. So I would say that is our number one. I mean, it's out there. There's just not enough of it, right? And we need to, as a community, continue to grow that skill base.
Yeah, that is such an important part, and I hear it over and over and over again. And a lot of times it's depth. You know, you have like a person, but you don't have the bench. You don't have the bench strength to come in.
And you know, we're competing with each other, right, internally within the federal service, but we're also competing with the banks and the financial sectors, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Everyone, you know, the good news is we're taking advantage of what the private sector is leveraging and has been for some time as a community, right? And I say community being the federal service community, but at the same time, we also compete with those same resources, and we just need to build that capacity up.
Absolutely. I think you're right on there in terms of identifying a major issue. Melonie, what do you think are some of the big challenges, some of the hurdles you still need to get over in order to get where you want to go with these programs?
Well, I'm going to just grab onto Luke's
Ditto,
coattail.
Luke.
Yes, I mean that is so very important. The skill sets and as you said, I like the bench. How deep we are. That sixth man, that seventh man coming off the bench. We really just don't have those persons because there are more lucrative offers possibly in other areas. And we're talking about more specialized skills. Again, I'm talking about zero clients, modular data centers, things of that nature, not just the jack or the Jill of all trades any longer. And I think with us at the State Department, another big challenge is just competing priorities. There are things that are they just come and they drop out of the sky, cybersecurity incidents and other major things that just occur that you have to take that starting five and put them on the hot thing at the time. So then something else has to sit and rest or have staff that may not be to the right skills to carry
just
it forward.
furthers Luke's point that you've got you just don't have the depth, and then something new pops and something new, and your best people need to be reassigned and address the issue of the day kind of thing. And if you're going to win the NCAA tournament, you're going to need to have bench strength, right? Really? You need some people to come off the bench to give people breaks. I want to hear from the rest of our panelists, and we will, but we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Luke McCormack from DHS, Melonie Parker-Hill from State Department, Bruce Downs from Department of Interior, Larry Sherrow from Brocade, Tony Gehr from Lockheed Martin Information Systems and Global Solutions, and Nathan Jones from Red Hat. We're talking data center consolidation. We were talking about the challenges that people face. We heard from a couple of our panelists, but Bruce, we haven't heard from you yet. What are some of the challenges that you see as you work your way through this and try to achieve your goals?
So one of them is just recognizing that the IT doesn't exist on its own. It serves the mission, and we have to work together. So every IT problem and every opportunity for IT is really just a mission problem or opportunity. So getting that together is a big challenge because it's really easy for IT technicians to fall into it's about the stuff instead of it's about the data. There are big cultural changes for us to make. We are changing how we do the business. It's not naming cloud. That's totally different to do business outside, from under your desk I talked about earlier. But it is a different concept. We need the different skills and capabilities and a different way of thinking about it. And not just the IT team, but the mission team, the procurement team, those who do budgeting and finance work for us, all have to kind of align on that. And there's some promise in how FITARA is rolling out for that and aligning. In a way, historically, our obstacles have been, we talk about space savings for data center consolidation. Well, that's not an IT thing, right?
Yeah, right.
that's a together thing that we have to do in alignment with the mission and the facilities and real estate planning folks. So changing the people and the skills they have, but also the processes and policies and getting the workflows and practices down that align for this. So, cloud buying, I love the vision of buying capacity and being able to put whatever you want into it. But that's a big change through the entire supply and service chain that includes acquisition, finance, the solicitors, in the industry. So that's pretty huge for us.
Excellent point. And you've kept our record intact. We've done 133 shows. And when we get to challenges, someone brings up the word culture when we're talking challenges, and you just did there too to keep our record intact. That's sort of like the magic word, where when we talk about challenges. Nathan, what do you think are some of the challenges that you bump into as you walk through this?
So we've seen customers, the expectations increase at a very fast pace. So if you look at the consumerization of IT and now what the cloud providers give customers in terms of auto provisioning, discovery, and a lot of these capabilities, now that's the expectation for the new traditional data center as well. So I think one of the things we're doing to try to help in that skills gap that both Melonie and Luke mentioned is trying to take familiar tooling that customers were used to in the traditional data center around Linux and virtualization and expand those so that customers can now manage new workloads like OpenStack and containers and platform as a service. So if we can help with familiar tooling and helping the traditional workforce expand and be able to manage both the traditional environment and the new Mode 2 environments, I think you'll see a greater efficiency there.
Excellent. Good point. Larry, Sherrow, what do you think are some of the challenges?
Well, and as my colleagues, we've hit most of the points, so
the
it's challenging.
You get to be ditto.
One of the biggest challenges that I see is when you have purpose-built installations. You have supercomputing that has purpose-built NAS. Those environments are very hard to move into virtualized, and also if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's the mentality. What we're talking about is very complex to try and remove power and cooling, make services do more with less. So a lot of the challenges are just that people struggle with the idea of change.
Yeah.
That's very challenging. I know we're talking about taking funding out of the equation. Funding is actually one of the reasons that's making this consolidation easier, because it's getting so expensive with vendor lock-in and licensing that something like OpenStack and then tool sets, as we've said, the tool sets to run those. Again, it's change. So that's probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think, and I said this before, and I don't know if I have the quote, if it was Robert Kennedy, but somebody once said that 1/3 of everybody is against everything all the time, no matter what it is, just by their human nature. Tony, Gehr, what do you see as some of the big challenges?
So let me talk about two. One you've heard of, and that's the skill sets. So it's so important. We all need to be advocates to reach young women and young men and get them interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. So it's absolutely critical. The second item is really kind of daunting. It's really legacy mainframes and a lot of COBOL out there that have to be migrated at some time. There's a long-term OpEx, and a fragility of the equipment seriously could threaten mission uptime. So we got to start to chip away at that challenge. Maybe it's refactoring, rewriting, encapsulating interfaces, wrapping key services, database migration to modern technologies, but having a multifaceted, agile, incremental approach and a roadmap are key to address that challenge.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And you're right about COBOL. It's like the point that was made about it. It's not broke, why fix it? But some of this code is very, very old across government. We've got about 12 minutes left in the program. We always like to talk about where this is all going for the future. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give us sort of your version of where we're going down the road with all this. Take about a minute and a half, and we'll work our way right back down the table towards me. And we'll start with Nathan. Nathan Jones, Red Hat. Where's this all going? What's your crystal ball look like? What's computing going to look like down the road because of what data center consolidation and virtualization, managed services, and the like?
Yeah, I mean, our vision is that if customers take advantage, again, of all these open concepts that we already talked about in terms of building these new architectures, these new data centers with agility in mind, building them with abstraction layers in mind so that, again, you have that portability, The next-gen data centers can truly be service providers that are flexible and can do what the cloud providers do today. So we see that, again, if the strategies are built right, you're going to have that portability, you're going to have the agility, you're going to have the ability to have a next-gen data center that can truly be a service provider and can take advantage of whatever infrastructure lies underneath and be able to take advantage of, again, some of these legacy architectures that we talked about here that are definitely not going anywhere probably in the next 5 to 10 years, but also definitely take advantage of and help the end users build applications and build services for the Mode 2 architectures that are definitely coming. So if we can marry those together and the data center can do that, I think we have a great win.
Excellent. I like that. My takeaway from that is make sure you get the strategy right up front. Tony Gehr, what do you think? Where's this all going?
Wow, the future, you got customers, they're completely mobile, and they want information instantly. So you got to put
wait till our kids get into the workforce.
You've got to put all that we have together: Agile, DevOps, cloud, platform as a service, containers, microservices, open source, advanced next generation data centers with a green energy footprint and pre-integrated telecom infrastructure. When you do that, you're going to get that day-to-day IT infrastructure savings. You're going to automate, you're going to continuously integrate and deliver, and that's going to bring you the money to bring more missions so those mobile users get that information instantly.
Sounds exciting to me. I look forward to those developments happening. Bruce Downs, what do you think? Where's this all going? What's your crystal ball look like?
Well, I think if you sum it up, we want our customers to have a credible choice between doing things the way they used to do it or had to do it to a better way of doing it.
I love that.
That's more flexible, that allows them an environment to innovate, or a springboard for innovation at least. And really that has to be something, right? So through cloud and excess capacity or planned reserve capacity to do things that allows them to take what they think they know about what they want and support what they actually end up needing, because that estimating what you need is a flaw. So how are we design it so it's flexible for them in that piece? And I love this buy once, use many approach that we took with FedRAMP. FedRAMP's got the vision right. I think that the industry, we in the government, and as we try to assess our risks, and that the industry has to build the ante to get into that game a little bit better. But we need to extend that not just from FedRAMP and security, but into other reusable use cases and models that we have that can be unlocked by the customers.
Yeah, Bruce, you're going to be like a hero at Interior, because your focus, your answers focused on the customer and the mission and understanding that. That'll go over big, I guarantee it. Larry Sherrow, Brocade, tell us a little bit about what you see for the future. What's it look like down the road?
Well, and I'll use some key terms. I see the approach as, or the future being NFV, network function virtualization, and an SDN, a centralized language and a central control system for securing the virtual network. Right now, with all the hack, all the penetration from third parties accessing your virtual environment, I can see NFV encrypting and doing complete separation of tenants in the virtual environment is going to be very key in the future.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, cybersecurity is such a big, big issue. We could do a show on that every month. And I actually taught the subject at graduate school on Saturdays for 19 years. And it just troubles me when I see things going on that are going on now. Not to mention that I was a victim of the breaches many, many times. But we'll leave me out of the question. Let's go to Melonie Parker-Hill here and hear about the future, Melonie, as to where you see these things going.
For the State Department, we are walking away from the brick and mortar buildings. We are going, again, modular data centers. We have major project initiatives set by the CIO that we're running towards. So right now, there are other initiatives. You have the Data Center Optimization Initiative that's out there. You have the executive order, 13693, that tells us that we're looking at sustainability and things of that nature. I would love to come back and be able to sit here and tell you that our data centers have a PUE of 1.3 or 1.2 and things of that nature. So that's where we're heading.
Well, we're going to invite you back next year so you can tell us just that very thing. But you're exactly right. There's a lot of very, very exciting things going on in that space, and we'll see where it all goes. Luke, Where's this all going for you down the road? What's the future look like?
I'll give you my crystal ball prediction here.
Okay.
And I will also tell you that somebody made a good point that it is very important to partner across your CXO community, because we had talked about the skill base with human capital, the acquisition with your acquisition community. There's different finance techniques when you go from CapEx to OpEx. So it takes a village to pursue this. If I look 5 years in the future, the federal CIO of today is not the federal CIO of tomorrow. I think it's a vastly different. In this area, this subject that we're covering today, I think they become smart buyers.
Okay.
With the advent of FedRAMP and the teaming that we're doing with our partners in the vendor community, I think they solve that in large part. You can assume very secure and very consumption-based capability, sort of internally and externally. That'll be available at good market rate prices and open competition and fully accessible. We're getting ready to start a pilot on a high baseline into the FedRAMP vendors, so I think that will continue to go up the stack, if you will. And then the federal CIOs are really going to focus on way up the value chain, right? And up the value chain is back to that, pointy end of the business. For DHS, for example, very operational agency, right? 240,000 employees, most of them operational in the airports, the seaports, in the embassies, et cetera. So that's mobile first, right? So we'll be porting a first port to mobile in those environments, and we're going to assume a lot of that underlying infrastructure is in place, it's secure, it's readily available, and it's at a market price that makes sense, and our focus is going to be on those business applications.
So the CIO is no longer focused on IT problems. The IT infrastructure is there, it's in place, it becomes a utility. You're focused on using those utilities for mission goals.
Right, focusing on the business area.
I think you're right.
Which, look, all of us do that as best we can, but we focus a lot sort of below the line because we have to. And I think there'll be a lot more focus above the line as time goes on.
Right. Get away from those day-to-day crisis and more focused on strategic items and how IT can support the business. All right. Well, this was great. Let me try to do my best to recapture some of the great thoughts that we had here today. We talked about progress, and a couple words I wrote down is it's a journey. We've been on a journey, and it's continuing, and we're moving. The other things that resonated with me were consumption-based. We're moving, I think Luke brought it up, move to consumption-based models. And I heard containers brought up in open source and being in a position to where you're not locking yourself in and you're able to have flexibility to do different things down the road as we move forward. When we talked about cloud and managed service, to me it was sort of like of course. Of course we're going to do virtualization. Of course we're going to do managed services. Of course we're going to have hybrid clouds and have certain things that will be in a hybrid environment. We're not just going to move stuff as is into another building. We really haven't accomplished anything if we're doing that. Let's modernize as we move along. Lessons learned, a lot of things bounced around there. What came up to me right away was definitions. I mean, just a definition of data center and definition of some of the things we're doing in creating the understanding. And someone brought up the point that you really need to understand and get across to the organization why we are doing this. People have to understand why, because you need stakeholder buy-in. And you're only going to get that stakeholder buy-in if you really drive that understanding. I heard smart computing coming up as, I think it was Luke brought it up. The term smart computing is a term that we need to begin to think about as we think about these things. And I heard that you need to get the right people involved. We have a depth issue, and you got to have the right people, the right contractors, and so forth to get things in place. Challenges, one that is obvious to everyone is the skill base. There's a high demand for STEM programs and IT people and cybersecurity people, and you're all competing with each other and so forth. And the depth sometimes is not there. So you need to figure out ways to work with industry and government working together to try to get the kind of skill base you need for this thing. Competing priorities are a challenge, because of that issue. Involving the mission. Cultural changes. We know people are just resistant to change, but this requires change. And then when we talked about vision, some of the things I heard is what's important is getting the strategy right up front. Make sure that you've got everything lined up before you embark upon your particular program. And then I heard about partnering across the organization and how important that is, that the CIO and the IT people partner across the organization. With that, I want to first thank all of our panelists for taking time from your busy schedules. I know you're all in very, very senior positions, so having you come out to spend some time and share your wisdom with us and our listening public is something that we're greatly appreciative for. Thanks to our sponsors for sponsoring our show. Without sponsors, we don't have a show, so we appreciate that. Thanks to all the great people here at Federal News Radio that make this such a pleasant experience each month when we do it. And most importantly, thanks to that listening audience out there that tunes in and listens to the show. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.